and the PBS does it 1,008.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, they don't want any changes in the limit of insurance, 160,000. It's
Someone's chatting there, and you can hear what you're saying on the call. So something about client stuff. So you may want to put it on mute. Okay, then. I know everyone has busy days, so we'll certainly start. And if there's any other people that trickle in, that's great. If you get a minute, just to put in where you're calling from in the chat feature there. And also, if you're alone or if there's other people with you, you don't have to name them all as such, but just nice for me to know we've got an activity. I want to see who's on their own and who isn't, see if we can make it work. So today we're going to do a little bit of a tiny little recap, just to kind of bring some people up to speed in case they missed the first section. And there's background noise there too, so if anyone can make sure you're on mute, so star 6 if you can. Otherwise, your phones, you can stick them on mute. There's a bit of background noise there. We're just going to do a little bit of a recap, just a couple of odds and ends. There's also a little bit of stuff from anyone who was with us on the December call around feedback and performance feedback. There's going to be a few things in here as well that'll be a bit of a recap. So I want to tap into that and see how much you remember. Not that I know who you are, but you know who you are. So today we're going to do a little bit more around performance coaching. In terms of what we're actually going to look at today, just trying to get my clicker to work here. I know it's that time of year, so I did want to, and a few people mentioned it's that time of year for them in terms of giving their performance conversations. So we'll definitely get into that space. We'll talk a little bit more about performance management as a whole, so the tools, etc. And how does it apply? So how does all this stuff we're talking about apply to that conversation for this particular annual review, or obviously as you work throughout the year with somebody? So we'll tap into that as well. So in terms of what is coaching, so a bunch of you were on the call, I'm sure, last time, a few weeks ago. So could you do me a favor, somebody, you can either speak or you can type it in the chat. So give me some words or phrases that come to mind when I say, what is coaching? And again, there's some background noise. So if you're not on mute, please, unless you want to speak, by all means, just pop yourself on mute.
How do you go on mute?
Oh, mute. Just do star on your phone. Just do star 6.
Thank you.
No, and to pull off is on star 6 too. So in case you want to talk and you're not talking to yourself. And by all means, I'm happy to have interactive phone chat here as well. So mentoring, supporting, helping employees excel. Love that, Patty. That's exactly right. Yes, to help themselves. That's such a key piece, helping them help themselves. It's sort of an approach. Yes, I think you are, Margie. If you try to speak now, I'll let you know. But I think you're on mute. So coaching is absolutely helping people help themselves, really helping them excel, tapping into that potential. And again, it sounds easy. It's not. It's something that you have to work at. Some people are more natural than others at it in terms of a style. So I'm just sort of helping you kind of come up with some ways, some tips and tricks to kind of get to that. And in terms of the model we talked about last time very quickly, and this will play into it when we talk about the performance conversation as well. So you go into a meeting or a conversation with someone around something. It could be something immediate that's happened or something that needs to occur. It could be something that you're going to talk about, just have a regular chit chat every quarter, for as an example. Yeah, you have your regular hour meeting with your employee. So it could be, okay, so what do we want to, what's our goal for the day? It could be, what's your goal for the year if you're doing your annual review? So, or if there's something that needs to shift, that could be the goal. So if your goal is to be more this or to learn more about this area, if you want to get into a certain side of the business that you haven't been into before, that could be the goal. And it could be a longer focus in terms of that conversation. Then you tap into the reality. So what's actually happening there? So if it's something somebody hasn't done before, so what do you know about that? So what is it you're thinking it should be? You know, what are your concerns around that area? So what's happening right now in that person's viewpoint and their perceptions? It gives you a sense of what their reality is. And if you're going to help them at all, you have to know what that is. If there's something stopping them, again, right, when we talk about sales, so, you know, working in your world before, working with a lot of folks, senior, junior, whoever, around, I'm uncomfortable selling. You know, I can do it organically with my book, but I'm not comfortable selling. So what is that? What's that about? What support do they need, etc. And then it's around, so you hang in there as much as you can to really understand what the concerns are, what the ideas are, you know, what their sort of what their end state is. You know, you have the goal figured out. What does that look like? And what's it into now? Then you get into options. So then you look at, okay, well, knowing all that, what do we look at, right? You know, what is some things that the person can do, and you want them to come up with that as much as possible. The minute you interject is the minute that becomes the Bible, shall we say. That becomes the one thing that they know they have to do because their boss recommended it in their mind. So holding off as long as you can to let them walk around all those options. And when you think that they've done it, ask them again, what else? And I bet you they'll come up with something. Then it's around the will and going forward. So the W in the GROW model is, so the will and going forward has a couple of different pieces. So how committed are they to it at that point? So discussing that. And also how you hold them accountable and how they hold themselves accountable there. So how many times do we have meetings with people and we get this great idea and all of a sudden, you know, they go off and it just, well, what was that thing we talked about last month? Oh yeah, did you make any headway with that? You know, we don't follow through. Accountability is not there for us or the employee, right? So how do we actually help drive that? And in the last bunch of slides too, there's thousands of questions you can ask, but there's some questions there to kind of help you guys come up with some standard things you can ask. Now theoretically, this model you can use for almost anything in terms of brainstorming, in terms of lots of things with your teams, but in terms of coaching, it works super well. And you can go around there, if the reality changes, go back to reality. So let's hold on now, that's shifted or our team shifted. What does it look like now? Is the goal changed? Is it not? We all know the goals change. One client, you know, really big client of yours, all of a sudden goes bankrupt. Okay, well, that was one of our biggest clients. So maybe our goal has to shift. What does that mean now, right? So going back to that reality piece. All right, so in terms of, I'm just going to pop through these here. We talked a little bit about listening. We did a little test last time, so to speak, to see how well you guys were listening. And it's one of the toughest skills when I work with senior leaders, which I'm going to go do a session there now after this with an executive team. One of the things that I notice is really lacking in all levels of leadership is listening. So we tapped into that a little bit last time. In terms of listening, there's different levels of listening. So if I put it up there and I say it's internal listening, what do you think that means? Let me know, phone or chat. What do you think that means, level 1? Internal listening. Body language, that's a good, yeah, it's not necessarily, but that's actually a really good guess. I really like that. That'll tap into something a little bit higher level. Listening to yourself, perfect. Yes, Debbie nailed it. It's essentially, and I think I got another little thing here, you're focusing on something internal. So you're listening to what's going on in your head. You're either listening around your own conversation that's going on in your head. It could be around the topic and you're distracted from the person. It could be in the back of the head going something completely different. Oh my gosh, I've got to pick up milk and butter when I go home. And oftentimes, if you're really intuitive and you're really good at noticing, as probably some of you do with your clients, you notice when they almost glaze over. I know my husband does that sometimes, glazes over, or if I talk about cooking or I talk about something that I love that he's not interested in, as an example. So we see the glaze, we know they're internally listening, and if we're savvy enough, we can notice that. It's a really great skill actually to have with your clients to know when they're starting to disengage. So yeah, internal listening is level 1. We don't necessarily want to be there. Sometimes we get stuck there. So when you're in that space, just a little tip is, you're thinking about something else, how do you get rid of that? So do you actually just write it down, so that you can get on and get back engaged in the conversation? Or do you need to just get out of the conversation? Is it really a best use of your time? Level 2 listening, so focus listening. You're actually listening. Yeah, you could be, I'm just noticing Lisa in the chat there said mentally processing what they're saying. It could be. I think that's focus listening. I think focus listening has an element of you're listening to the person, right? You're focusing forward. You're not focusing internal. You're looking at the person. You're listening to what they're saying. But you nailed it in a way, though, is that we often, for the next level, which is a bit higher, we don't get to that true listening. We're processing, and we won't have time to do an exercise on this today, but I think I had it in the last slides around taking that pause, taking a pause and a break, and listening, asking a question and just standing back and listening. And you might have to wait a while for that to actually occur, and there's a lot of silence there. So focus listening, yeah, it's only level 2. So you're listening, you're probably disengaging a little bit, thinking, oh gosh, what could I say next? Or what makes sense next? Or what's happening? But are you truly listening to every word they're saying? As a coach, I listen either on the phone or in person with people, and it's interesting when sorry, I don't have her name there, who mentioned about body language. That's absolutely part of listening. Actually, body language is around 2/3 of listening in terms of how you notice what people are really thinking and feeling. You can see through their body. But as a coach, sometimes I'm on the phone, I actually have to close my eyes, put my legs up on the chair, relax, try to focus on every little nuance of what they're saying. And sometimes, and I'm telling you, no one's perfect, and I certainly am not, sometimes it's the last word they say that means the most. So if we're distracted and our heads are going into a different place, then all of a sudden we're really not listening. When your employee says to you something and if the tone changes, the word is different, they kind of look at the floor when they talk about it, what's that all about? And that is listening. So when you elevate to that 3rd level, then it's about everything. You're noticing the people around you, if there's interaction, if you're in a larger setting and you're listening to what the person's saying. You're also listening to what the person's not saying. So this is where those questions come in handy, right? You ask the questions and you just let the person sit, take their time, answer it, and it gives you time to think. The hardest part with coaching, and of course I'm a certified coach and trained and everything, and hundreds of hours of training, etc. So it's not necessarily what you guys are going to do every day, but the biggest piece is when you notice yourself getting distracted, just be kind to yourself, pull yourself back and say, I really need to listen to this employee. When the employee's talking, you have to make sure, am I listening to every word? Don't get caught up in what you're going to say next. This isn't about you. This is about them. This is about them actually. And trust me, when you're coaching in a good way and the person feels engaged and they know you're listening, they're not judging you. As leaders, we often go into these sessions like performance reviews, and we're so stressed about how we're going to be perceived and do we do the job right that we don't actually take the time to listen. So take that moment, really listen to somebody, and you will naturally come up with a comment or a question after that point. And it was the biggest thing as an extrovert and a verbal thinker, as an extrovert, for me to learn is just wait, listen to it all, and then you will naturally come up with another question and trust yourself. You're smart people. Trust yourself. In terms of coaching skill, who remembers what this means? Do you remember from anyone who was involved in the session in December? See if anyone remembers. It's
It's why am I talking?
Yes, thank you. Much appreciated. It's why am I talking? And it's something where on a webinar, it's great. I can talk to you guys. It's wonderful. It's very natural. But oftentimes we're talking too much. So when you're having these conversations, I always recommend, which I probably said before, 70 to 80% of the talking should be done by the employee, your team or whoever you're with. So you can coach a team just as much as you can coach an employee. We're not going to do team coaching today, but theoretically, I'm sure you can understand what that means. So why am I talking? Why am I actually responding in a lengthy way? Why am I offering all these tips? How is this helping the employee? Sometimes it might, but most of the time it doesn't, if you're in that sort of conversation. So in terms of, and this is another recap, so open-ended questions and leading and closed questions. So can anyone tell me, I think I have it on, what's a closed question? Again, a little recap for some who were involved in the session in December. How would I answer with a closed question? Yes or no answers, yes. So yes or no answers. You've got these questions where maybe it's a clarification. You're just asking, you just want a yes or no answer. And we're going to test you now in this for anyone. We'll use the chat for those that are alone, but we'll do a little exercise now to see if you can change from those questions. So did you do it? Yeah, you might need to know that information. Did it actually occur? And a leading question, I won't ask as such, is leading someone somewhere, right? Just have a quick example I've heard over the years, considering the CEO is keen on option A, which one do you think we should go with, right? You're leading the person a certain direction. There's really no other way to answer. It's really almost rhetorical question. So that's a leading type question. There's fact gathering ones. You really want to know about something. What's the name of that? Oh gosh, what company was that with? Who was giving you the best quote? It could certainly be fact gathering questions. And then you get into open-ended questions. So what are some words that we'd start an open-ended question with? How and why. Interesting. And what? Good job, Janice, on the ball this morning. Thanks, Janice. The one thing else, and where, Kathy, thanks. Absolutely. Where could fall into it as well. So in coaching, a couple of tips. The how, the what, the where really are the most impactful. The one thing I'll say, which I would have spoken about before, is the why. So when I ask someone, why did you do that? It tends to be something that if you think back to your childhood, and I think about my children, why comes across as almost a parental. So why did you do that? Why did you make that? Why did you pick that market? It's almost like you can almost feel people's tension when that happens, unless you've got a very strong relationship and it's very trustworthy. It can be quite negative. So how can you frame your whys in a different way? So, okay, so what was your process? Walk me through your process. Tell me about how that panned out to pick that market. Again, same question or same, move towards a question. What would be the process you walk through to get there? So there's different ways you can frame it. It's one of the toughest things to do because why is so natural for us, but it does in terms of especially an employee and a supervisor relationship. It's collegial, it might be fine as well, but again, what does the relationship look like? So if you think about open, powerful questions. Sometimes the simplest questions are all you need as a leader. In terms of asking them about their performance, it could be anything, and I don't even know what I have here. So a lot of things could be, so you're talking about someone's performance, it could be, oh, okay, what do you think? How do you think you did this year? What would be one thing that stopped you, right? What would be your biggest challenge? What's the challenge? What's the opportunity? What does that mean to you? I mean, what's the concern here? Simple little questions said in the right tone can lead to a lot of peeling back the layers of your employees and really understanding what's driving them, what's motivating them, what's scaring them. Because let's face it, coming to you guys and saying, look, I don't know how to do this. But in a very open dialogue and a trusting environment to say, I do find this piece a little challenging, closing. I really find closing challenging. I can create that relationship, but closing the deal is tough. Or I don't know when I'm out networking how to start that conversation. I'm not sure how to actually just go up to somebody and start talking. Little things like that in your type of world. Or if you're on a call, how do you ask someone for referral, right? If you have a trusted client, how do you actually get them to do that? So understanding what's behind it can be really, really helpful. My suggestion here is if you can come up, if nothing else today, come up with 5 or 6 questions that are natural. You say them, again, you have to say them in the right tone. The tone makes a huge difference that you could start using. And as I think I mentioned in December, I used to have a list of some standard ones that came naturally to me. And when I had Why Am I Talking Up on my wall for 7 years, when I was learning to coach and becoming a better coach, I had those questions there just to refer to, especially in the very early days. So some natural 5 or 6 things that kind of get you used to asking those questions. So some of you are alone, some of you aren't. I'm going to get you. We're going to take a 2 to 3 minute exercise. Check the time because I'm terrible at checking at it. 2 to 3 minute exercise, just trying out asking open-ended questions. If you don't have anyone, if you're all by yourself, you're going to ask me questions in the chat, and I'm going to answer them in the chat. So I want you to try to think of open-ended questions. I put it out, where's your last vacation, as an example. I use this a lot in training when I do with teams. So pick one person next to you, or if there's 3 of you, that's fine. One person can ask the questions. They have to be open-ended. If the person's responding, I want the person to respond yes or no if it's not an open-ended question, or answer it exactly how you're answering. Don't elaborate, just to try out how easy for some of you it is and how tough for some of you it is to ask those open-ended questions. So for those of you that are on your own, I'm just gonna mute myself, and we're gonna go for about 2 or 3 minutes on the chat. You can actually tag team each other if you want and just ask me open-ended questions and see how it feels. Okay, so I'm going to stick myself on mute, and good luck. And hopefully you can hear me. I'll sort of yell in case you're still chatting when we get back on the call. I'll time it now for about a little less than 3 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes. All right. So, dying to know what you thought of that. So the people who were on the chat, I sort of saw it. You could see, hopefully you could notice the ones that I was answering a little more long-winded. So please let us know on the phone, or how did that feel? What was difficult about it? It isn't always natural. Absolutely, Janice. It's absolutely not natural. It's something that most of us really don't know how to do well. Some people are trained, including myself, in terms of how to do it, but it took many years to make it feel comfortable. Yes, it takes a minute to think about the question, doesn't it? It definitely took a minute to think about it. And once someone answers really quickly, then you're like, oh, hold on, what's the next question? And it is hard to concentrate on different types of questions. And when in doubt, I always say, when in doubt in a conversation, always ask a question. But oftentimes an open-ended question, not necessarily fact gathering, is the easiest. So in the chat, which people, it didn't leave to further conversation. And I was very specific in the chat. I would answer with one-word answers if that's all it took. So the longer ones, there was one, what did I enjoy most about my vacation? I had 3 questions come through in the chat while I was typing that, because I was thinking about it. I had to think, oh yeah, what did I love the most? And I had to pause for about, 3 seconds before I started typing. And that's actually a great sign of a good question. It was sort of like, yeah, what did I love most? And then when I said what I liked most, then how do you tag onto that? So if I said I liked being by the pool and fully relaxing, it could be a question around, oh, what was the most relaxing thing? Right? Not thinking about what you want to ask next. You wait to hear what I said. So what was the most relaxing thing for you? How did that affect you? How did it feel when you came back to work being that relaxed? Like, there's so many things you can dig into to learn more about me, or if it's your client, or if it's your employee. And of course, vacation's a little bit, innocuous, not really a big thing in your world, but no different around asking them around if someone says something, but oh, that's the way so-and-so does things. Okay, so how do you feel about the way they do that? Simple questions that can help you dig deeper into understanding why someone's not performing the way they should, or how can you get them to perform that much better. So hopefully it just kind of opened your mind to, it is more difficult than you think. How often do you ask a question? And a challenge out there to actually, how can you ask a question maybe this week that you wouldn't normally ask? Something a little different. It doesn't have to be a performance situation, but just start practicing asking those questions. And sometimes in a team, you'll notice there's somebody who does it really well. It's often somebody, as an extrovert, I can say this, who's introverted, who's really listening, and they ask this really kind of sage-like, really powerful question. You're like, wow, that just shifted everything, almost like they're coming up with, or this comment, I'm noticing, gee, this, or this, or have we considered this? And all of a sudden you're like, wow, that's powerful. So how do you actually tap into those people as well? So in terms of coaching, just a couple of quick little tidbits to sort of tie this up. We're going to get a little bit into performance now in a minute to kind of tap into that. I also have a bunch of slides here. We may not get through them all. So when Carrie sends them out, you can certainly email me if you have any questions, if there's something we don't get through, especially on the performance management side. So again, I'm not going to read all this or anything, but coaching is really about the listening. It's really about just no distractions in an ideal world, especially if it's a performance conversation. No distractions, ideally not behind a desk. There's no one in between. It's very much 2 people sitting maybe side by side, or if it's in a boardroom, you just sit next to them in the boardroom, as an example. Asking those open-ended questions. Try it out. It's interesting because when you ask a really powerful one, you will hear a blank space, empty space. And you gotta embrace that silence and know that when you've asked that question, the person's thinking, right? I shared that last one when I first started coaching, and the person on the other line was it was silence. And it totally freaked me out. And I asked the executive, so, are you still there? And he goes, oh yeah, it was just a great question. So you've landed a really good one when there's silence, and it takes them a few minutes to come up with their response. So the other piece is trust your gut. I don't know what you guys do in the industry, but a lot of people are very intuitive. So they'll be able to read people really well, or they'll have a feeling, and everyone can, but some people are better than others. What is it that you're noticing? So if I went to each of you and said, tell me about your team, chances are you're going to be noticing things. There's something, yeah, I've noticed he's not quite as engaged, or he hasn't been quite himself lately. So how do you use that to your advantage? So when you're talking to the person, I've noticed you're not, you seem not yourself these days. What's going on? question. That's it. That might be all you need to ask. And even if he or she doesn't answer, they know you're caring, they know you're listening, and they know you're noticing, right? So it's really effective. So if you're in a session with somebody, you could say, I'm noticing you don't seem comfortable when we talk about that, or I'm noticing this, or I'm noticing that. Doesn't mean you're right. You could absolutely be wrong, but you're putting it out there just to let them know that you are noticing something, and they can actually help you reset it if that's not true. And then restating. One of the biggest illusions in the world is we actually communicate effectively. So how do you actually confirm things? So at the end, it could be what they're talking about. You say, okay, here's what I'm hearing. I think I'm getting what you're saying, and here's what it looks to be. And then especially with performance, you want to make sure you're aligned. So do we actually understand that we're on the same page? So knowing that, what would be your next 3 steps you would do? Or, just repeat back to me now, just to make sure we're aligned. And so what did you hear today? Or what are the key takeaways you have from today? Clarify, make sure that you understand what that means. Brainstorming we talked about, so you can actually help generate these ideas through this process. What else could it be? What else is such a great question? What else could it be? What else could you do? What else, who else can support you? This helps with goal setting, accountability. So when you finish a mini session, a full session, or whatever it might be, so how are you going to know what's going on? So how can you hold yourself accountable to that? Or how am I going to know that you're successful in that? Or how do you create an environment where the person's actually reporting back to you? If they come up with something they want to try out, how are they reporting back to you? It helps them hold themselves accountable as much as you can hold them accountable. And the feedback piece plays into that as well. I've got a few slides here on feedback for anyone who missed it, but I think these are all recorded, so you can certainly go and listen to it, but it'll give you a sense of some quick little ways to provide feedback that isn't, people don't take as, offense to, so to speak. All right, SMART goals, quickly. Knock it out there in the chat. What does SMART stand for? I should have S dot, M dot, etc. What's the acronym stand for? There's someone out there that must know what SMART goals are. There we go, specific. Yes. What else there, Lori? Do you know what the other ones are? Measurable. Lori's on a roll. Yeah. What else, Lori? Oh, attainable, achievable, attainable. Absolutely. One of those 2 A's. Actually, that's right, Margie. Tangible. Yeah, absolutely same. So realistic and tangible, or time. Tangible it could be. As some people say, time bound as well. So realistic is the R component. So I'll just pop them up there. And again, there's different versions of it, but it'll just give you some idea. And in terms of SMART goals, in coaching, whether it's around something tangible or not, you can absolutely set up goals. For example, leaders will say to me, oh, well, that's fine, but when we're talking about sales, we're talking about processing, administration, all that stuff. Yeah, we can come up with tangibles for that. But what sort of specific things can we come up with? If I'm trying to change my behavior, what does that mean? So I have clients who, when we do coaching sessions, they come up with very specific things around behavior. So it could be, I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to ask at least one question a week in my meetings with my team that I wouldn't have asked before. I'm going to wait and not interject when there's silence and I'm asking a question. It could be I'm going to meet with my team more because I'm not getting to know them and I'm going to have those. Maybe it's how many coaching sessions you're having with your team. There's lots of specific things you can have around behavior. It doesn't show the effect of it in terms of how the shift is, but it'll help you hold yourself accountable to those executable things that you can do to make, to move forward, whatever you're trying to do. Measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And I've got the, the typical things there that you can read and have for afterward. I think the key here is the relevant is a really big one here. How is it relevant to the organization to drive the strategy? How is it relevant to the individual? So it could be the individual from they're not performing well to where they need to be, or maybe they're a high potential, a high performer that for a succession plan you want to get to the next level. So how relevant is it to that? Not just because the person happens to want to do something, right? How does it tie into their role, their future with the organization, or the strategy would be some of the main areas. Now, some of you probably live and breathe this performance management stuff. I'm just going to run through a few tips Maybe new to some, maybe just, you know, you could teach this yourself. So in terms of performance management, it's a process. Performance coaching is an ongoing through the year. Performance coaching includes feedback and all those pieces. It's very fluid. It can be done at the water cooler, shall we say. It can be done at any point. Performance management is the process we've brought in because we don't do that. We don't have those performance conversations. We don't ask employees about how they're doing and ask what support they need. We don't do those things. So we hold ourselves accountable to, okay, at least once or twice a year, we're going to get together and have these formal conversations. So you prepare for it, you review and you conduct, do the review itself, you monitor and see what comes out after the fact, and you recognize and reward. So what does it mean if I'm successful? What does that actually mean? But the problem is, how many people on this call don't get stressed when they think of performance reviews? Anybody willing to admit they don't get stressed? I always did, by the way. I've learned much better now. So there's definitely some stress out there. It's what I'm hearing. So stress, yeah, it can cause a great deal of stress for us as leaders. The employee doesn't necessarily think so, but it absolutely does. It's one of the toughest things I see new leaders having to take on, and it can cause them incredible stress. So when you think about it from a coaching perspective, though, you're having a conversation, you're asking them questions, you're helping them come up with it. They should be talking 80% of the time. If you've been doing performance coaching during the year and you're having conversations asking about what they're doing, how successful they think they are, what support they need, all those things, it's going to be relatively quick. Theoretically, if you're doing it right the whole year, this portion of the performance management process of just reviewing last year should be really just a recap of everything. In terms of there's ratings and all those things which add another element, absolutely, and it's documented, so for sure it's going to have a stress level as well. Just again, I'm not going to walk through everything here, but in terms of what that commitment, sometimes people go through this and it's literally a checkbox. So how do you actually make them more effective from a coaching perspective? So how do you get them involved in the objective setting? So you know that corporate has come back if you're a bigger enterprise and you've got a bunch of different divisions and things. Well, we know that the executive wants this, or we know the owners want this. So how does that work in our world? And you work together on that, or it could be very much a top-down. So it could be bottom-up. Some organizations have, what do you think you need to achieve this year to be successful? Not as common anymore. They used to be more common years ago. It's tough. Yeah, it can absolutely, Mario, be very stressful from a negative. I don't want to make it negative for the employee. Theoretically, there should be no surprises in that annual review, because it should be throughout the year. And I can tell you one thing, as a leader, from a negative, having a negative environment, if you can actually talk to people and talk throughout the year, and if they really are struggling and they're not meant to be in your company or industry, and you walk through it in the proper way, oftentimes they self-select out of the organization because they know they're not a fit, or there's another role they should go into. So keeping up honestly, just talking, checking in, how's it going? How's that report going? All those little questions that you can ask, and really listen to the answer. If they're, oh no, it's fine. You sure? What would be one thing I can help you on here? When should I check with you next, right? Who else can help you? Is there anything else you need, right? Just keep checking in with them. Smart objectives, absolutely. Make smart objectives for sure. Don't make them loosey-goosey, very generalized. Give them very specific, tangible, so they can sink their teeth into. They know their role. They know their expectations now for their role. And if they're struggling with it, gives you something tangible to talk about, okay? In terms of the objectives themselves, how does it help them? So there's different ways I look at it when I look at performance management. I look at it as the role. What are the role objectives? So specifically, you need to deliver this, you need to deliver this, you need to deliver this. It's also about the how, which I think I have here in a minute. It's the what you do, but it's how you do it. So you might have your own company values, like how are they aligning with their values and their execution? We hear every day, we all hear about bullying in the workplace, about toxic employees, around people that are just, people roll their eyes around because they're just, oh, I got to put up with so-and-so today. So, every team needs to have this open environment where people can talk about it. Is it interesting? And in the objectives, how do we actually make people shift, right? How do you actually, it's the how. You could be the best salesperson around. Totally, you could rock it out of the park. I've seen it. And they leave dead bodies behind them. So the what may be fine, but the how may not be effective. So really, what's the balance there? What do you need it to be? And in terms of their own advancement, the young people these days, I'm telling you, they want to know how to elevate. So you've got to have that career advancement piece, which we'll talk about in a second. And time-wise, I'm going to whip through a couple of these. Most people find their performance management ineffective, by the way. Standard, you see it every day, see it all the time, because it's a one-time event. It's not a way that you work as a leader. It's not what you do. That's what you get paid to do. Well, I don't know if we all get paid enough to do that, depending on your situation, but that's what we get paid to do, to have those conversations on a daily basis. Even if you have your own book of business and you're trying to manage the team is significantly important. How do you make it part of your priorities? So how's it valid and reliable? I'm not going to get into too much of that from a performance perspective. If you have any questions, just let me know. In terms of, are you actually measuring the right things to help move the organization forward, to make sure behavior is done properly? All that. So is it valid? Is it actually, or is it reliable? Does it actually happen differently in your organization? Does it happen whereby people are going to one leader and you're getting rated differently than another? Okay, so I call them, well, we call them calibration sessions often with HR. So how do we calibrate? How do we make sure that everyone in the organization and the leaders actually get together and talk about the ratings they're going to give their employees to make sure that you're not all giving the same amount? So here's what I put in there just to give you an example. So a lot of people have ratings. So anyway, just let me know. Just put a little yes if you have in the chat, if you guys actually rate employees, like 1 to 7, 1 to 5, 1 to 3, whatever. If you do, I just put it in there so I can have a sense of how many people do. It's a good way to do it. If you've done your performance coaching throughout the year and you've actually had all those conversations, chances are very high this person knows what they're going to be anyway. Again, it's not a surprise. They self-rate themselves, which is always recommended, and usually they'll come in. Some people who come in and say, oh, I'm a 5, and you want to give them a 3. We all have seen those, but here's the kicker on that, is one of two things is happening. Either you guys are not aligned as leaders in terms of what it means, or it hasn't been communicated. So if there's a rating of 1 to 5, I always say there has to be a way to reach all of them. Some leaders go, yeah, no one's ever going to be 5. No. It should be attainable, and people should know what it means. If your target's to bring your new business target up to 100,000 this year, it should. Now, this is an easy example. If it's at 125, maybe that's a 4. If it's at 150, it's 50% higher, then maybe it's a 5. Right? I don't know if you get 5 overall, but for that category, you know exactly what's achievable, and it makes it very much easily aligned. What I also see is, 3 generally means I'm doing my job the way I was hired, okay? But you need to figure out what a 3 would mean in your organization and what a 4 means and what a 5 means. And every leader needs to be aligned. And if I rate someone a 5 and you're challenging me on that in a calibration meeting, I should be listening to that. Am I biased? And again, I'm not going to walk through all the biases here, but we have lots of biases when we rate employees, even if it's not a number rating. So I'm not going to go through them all, but we look at things that, but he brought in that great account in November. Yeah, but he sucked, excuse my language, the first whole part of the year. But we have that recency bias of, he just did that. Or, but he's so good at this. He's so good at this, forget the other stuff. He's still a 5, right? Some people more lean to being more positive, like myself. I've always had to struggle with giving people lower ratings, even though I know it's right. Am I more lenient? Am I stricter? Is something more important to me, even though the organization says it's all important? I really only care about the bottom line of what sales are. I don't care if the person's affecting others, right? So it's a halo effect. So just to keep remembering, we're very biased when we do these things. So talking to others. The other way you can do it is do a 360. Anyone done a 360 review before? It's not as common. I use it all the time. I've used it historically all the time in my leadership development roles, my HR roles. The one thing I will say about it in coaching, I use it all the time. So I work with hundreds of, last year I probably did 70 or 80 of them with leaders. So what it is, and I'll explain in a second, but you're getting, other people's perspectives around certain criteria. So the supervisor, you're rating yourself, the supervisor rates you, your peers rate you, potentially other stakeholders as appropriate. It could be other supervisors, other, could be a senior person or an owner, and people that report to you. So theoretically, you get a 60 view of you. So if you're in the middle, everyone's around you, and they all give you perspectives on how you're doing. Just because one person says you're one way doesn't necessarily view the same by others. The question is, what should you be viewed? So this is sort of just a visual example. It's great in coaching if you can actually ever get this, or at least if you don't have the ability to do this, there's lots of tools out there I use, well, the main tool I use, but you can do internal versions as well. And from a 360 perspective, even if you get feedback from your direct reports, you're going to get it from your boss anyway. Can you get it from your direct reports? Can it be anonymous? Can you make it anonymous? Can you create that feedback environment? So again, this isn't very clear. I actually took this off another old slide I had. But if you look in the top left, it's one of the most powerful tools you can have for change and growth, because I'm seeing how other people see me. I know in my head what I'm intending to do. I know in my head how I think I'm being perceived. But as you and I know, if we all see somebody who's being ineffective, what's the chances the person inside is going, yeah, I'm really ineffective. I go in and I do an ineffective job at work. Probably not. They have good intentions and they think that's coming out, and it's probably not occurring. Again, just some information there that can be helpful. This is the what and the how. So how you meet a goal is as or more important as the goal that you achieve. I firmly believe that. When I see people not working in teams and not working in organizations, it's the how. It's often, well, it can be the what. Maybe they're not hitting their targets, but oftentimes it's how they're working. And when people don't on your team meet their targets, we got to look at ourselves. So how can that play out? Last couple of things, because I know time is pretty much up. So I'm just going to whip through it super fast in the next minute or so, just so you can see what it is. You're going to see the slides come up. Any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Simple call or email, and I can help you out. All for free, don't worry. I'm not going to charge you for it. Formal appraisals, the point of it is to look at your staff and sort of say, in the longer term, look, it's getting harder out there. You've got younger people coming in. There's a lot more turnover than there used to be. They're not sticking with their jobs as long. They're moving around a lot more. So understanding who's promotable, who's not promotable, and who needs to be corrected is significant. There's tons of these what's called 9-box grids out there, but I wanted to show you what it could be in your world. We used to do this when I worked actually in your industry, and we did it across Canada. But each team leader did it. So where does my team fit? So if I have 2 or 3 people that report to me, which bucket are they in? So it's versus potential on the vertical and the horizontal being performance. So you've got everything from underperformers down the bottom left to the high future leader. Wow, this is the superstar in the upper right. You could have the core employee in the middle. Nothing wrong with it. Super workers. They may not be the future leader, but they're super workers. How they play into these boxes will help you figure out how to coach. Often the squeaky wheel in the bottom left gets more time with you, not necessarily the best thing. Really, if they're in that bucket, it's really a matter of last chances. If you have a luxury of HR in your group, tap into HR. Look, I'm in last chances. Got to have a performance improvement plan. You got to help me out. Like, get the support you need to help either improve the person or exit the person. And the people in the top buckets often get lost because they're your go-to. So you're just leaving them alone. Not the right thing to do. They need just as much support in a different way. Okay? So just really think about that when you're looking at it. So how coaching fits into this process, we don't have time to have dialogue around that. But if I go in, last thing I'll say is if I go into a performance meeting and my boss says to me, so Heather, how do you think? We've had lots of conversations during the year, just sum it up for me. And I go for, 3 or 4 minutes talking about the highs and lows, what I learned, what I still think I need to do. Pretty much wrap it up, 20 minutes maybe, fair enough. I'd like to interject, hold on, you're hard on yourself on this, or don't forget, when you made that mistake, you did correct it, but, maybe you could have done it a little quicker. There's, little dialogue around there just to solidify that, maybe 20 minutes or so. Okay, so knowing that now, Heather, when you look at the next year, what do you see ahead? Simple question, something like that. I don't know, it just came out on the top of my head, right? So what do you see moving forward in 2018? What would make success for you in 2018? And you really have a collaborative approach around future. right? What are our goals for this year? Heather, you and I know that the top's down saying you got to have these performance objectives. Fair enough. So how are we going to work together to make sure you can achieve those? What do you need? What support do you need? Also, what about yourself? How do you want to grow? Right? What areas are you looking into down the road? How can I help you understand what you need to do better to get there? Okay, just think about how powerful that would be. So again, these ones are the feedback sandwich. The feedback ones are on the session from December if you want to listen to it. In a nutshell, feedback's information you give. It's absolutely required in a performance conversation. You need to give them feedback, positive feedback or constructive feedback, and a balance of both. If you're good at one, make sure you do both. You balance it out with the other. So don't give the positive and then give constructive and then give positive again. You're going to lose it in the mix. People will think all positive and they won't notice the little nugget in the middle, or they'll be too self-critical and they'll be like, oh, they're hiding that little nugget. There's more to it. Okay. So in terms of giving feedback, I'll just summarize it here very quickly. If I go back, there we go. The feedback formula. Again, there's an article I wrote on it, all that sort of stuff. If you want to have a copy, let me know, or you can listen to the other webinar. When you did the following, make it fact-based. The impact on the team was, the impact on the client was, the impact on me was, what did you intend? Maybe next time you could do this, or what could you do next time? Simple, fact-based, boom, boom, boom. Not about them as a person, not about them as their intent. It's all about fact, okay? Just a simple one. Couple little things there you can look at. So I know I'm late as usual. Sorry about that, guys. I really apologize. So I will send these to PDF them and send them to Carrie so she can send them out. But one thing you learned, one takeaway of something you're going to shift, do better, or notice moving forward. If you could pop that in the chat or call it out to me, that helps me know that there's something there shifting. And maybe if you say it out loud, you might commit to it. So pop it in there and let me know. Stop talking. Yes, I relate to that one, Lori. Yes, open-ended. Listen. Yes. Excellent. Listening is such a big one. I can't tell you enough about that. Try it out. Try some new skills and see how they are. And don't be hard on yourself. It could take years to actually master. Little bits at a time. Open-ended, excellent. And I know our next session, I think, is Teams. I apologize. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I think it's Teams. So if you can chime in next time, or at least have one of your team chime in, so at least they can take the chunky takeaways that make sense for your team with you, that would be great. Yeah, button when you're talking. Yes, I know. I'm very out there. I don't know. Debbie, thanks for that, Debbie. So thank you all. I really appreciate it. Again, I'll make sure all the slides get out. Any questions, let me know, and we'll talk to you next time. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Mm-hmm.